of your learning experience so that then you can pass it on to others in the framework that it should be passed on. Color is not color. Dance is not only dance. Music is not only music. For some groups, it is more than music. Because if you're looking at the Caribbean, Latin America, Africa, it is a way of calling spirit. And when you talk about Tito Puente, when you talk about Dizzy Gillespie, if you don't understand that he had Yoruba rhythms in jazz and influenced jazz with Tintindeo, Manteca, right? There was a marriage between Yoruba traditions, African American traditions that come together, right, in an Afro-Cuban context. That if you understand the music of Tito Puente and Pedro Escobar, you see that multiplicity of influences that are African, native, European, right? Having an expression, a popular expression, but they're all grounded in a spiritual context, coming from indigenous traditional cultures. So that if you're going to understand going into the public schools with the diversity that's there, and talk about a creative expression that hits home, that relates to the young people's experience, then you have to understand that experience. And that experience is not only one based on economic differences, because we also have to talk about the economic differences that exist in this country and what dominates, right? But it is grounded in the experience that these young people have had and are having. And how those experiences of the past connect to them now living in the United States. And what is that art of meaning, and what is that culture of meaning that they bring with them, and their parents bring with them, and their grandparents bring with them? It's one that speaks. And the issue here is, do you speak, listen, and understand the language that is being spoken by our young people? And I don't mean Spanish to English. I mean that experience and that history and that dislocation that they have had, being torn out of their root traditions into another tradition, and how that translates. And it seems to me that my training, at least at NYU and at Columbia, didn't prepare me to do that. And it's not an issue of color. I want to be very clear. It's not an issue of color, because I didn't understand it coming out of academia. Because somehow academia tries to divide what should be naturally connected. We departmentalize experiences that are holistic. And if we understand that that division is a false division that someone created, I don't know why, maybe to have more jobs, so that you have an art teacher and you have a cultural and a humanist, right? We understood that in presenting at the Caribbean Cultural Center, at Apple Shop, and all the discussions that we had as collaborators in looking at the cultural grounding movement that we kept pushing, right, is that you have to have a lot of people in the room in order to do the work that you do. Not only do you include scholars who are expert in the tradition, you include community scholars that are expert in their own traditions. You include traditional leaders. You include people who are interested. And through these conversations and these focus groups is that you can develop an exhibition. It is through these focus groups that a dance performance can come out. It is through these collaborations and these connections, right, that an art, if you will, experience can be had, because all of the voices are present to contribute to that experience. And somehow we think that if we come out of academia and we've had training, that we're the experts. And again, I say, it's not an issue of color. It's just an issue of how you learn and the context with which you learn. And you can pass on that information and that reality. So that I would propose that in establishing programs that have to do with the various communities that comprise this nation, as we go out into public education and cultural centers and other places, that we are very clear that we go as learners. That we don't go as the expert. Because culture is constantly shifting, realities are constantly shifting. And for different groups, different realities exist. And the challenge is to be present, is to be in the moment of understanding that shift. Because rather than developing artifacts, you want to develop fluidity. That what is possible today may not be possible tomorrow, and that's good. And that if we're going to change and influence lives, that we have to change ourselves. Because my mama told me you can't give what you don't have. And if you have something to offer, you have to assume that others have something to offer. So it's an exchange. It's always an exchange of information. It's never a top-down, or I got the degree and she or he doesn't. So that this work in community grounding, this work in community arts, if you will, and I would add somehow the term of cultural community arts, that we understand that there's a lot of learning to do. And it's not in books. Even with the writing that exists today, it's not in books. Because the framework is still one of looking at the other, one of talking about art decontextualized from meaning, decontextualized from culture. And they have to be connected if we're going to have a real conversation with the audiences we're trying to reach. So I'd like to stop there. Thank you for listening.